So today we are actually beginning a brand new series I'm super excited about. It's entitled The Fundamental List. And I love this title. I did not come up with it, but I love the title, The Fundamental List, instead of The Fundamentalist. Get it? Got it? Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, yeah, I thought you did. The Fundamental List, recovering the essentials of our faith. And in this series, the next few weeks, here's what we're gonna attempt to do. We're going to attempt to answer the question, what must one believe in order to be a faithful follower of Jesus? Not what must one do. We talk about the do part all the time, and if you're new to our church or you're watching online for the first time, this is a group of people who aren't just about believing, we're about doing, because doing is what makes a difference in the world, not just believing. Believing doesn't make any difference. But at the same time, it's important to ask this question, and I'll explain why in a minute. What must a person believe in order to be a faithful follower of Jesus? What's essential? Or to the title of the series, what's fundamental? What's the bare minimum? What's the can't do without, the can't be without? And what makes this so confusing for so many people, and maybe for many of you, and I think at some point in all of our lives, we all kind of bump into this. What makes it so confusing is the Christian faith is like a giant house made up of large living rooms. Just living rooms, okay? And each has a double door leading to the outside world because all of these living rooms are trying to invite people into their version of the Christian faith. But each one comes, and there's these little passageways between all the different rooms because people are constantly changing churches and changing faith traditions. And each one of these, the challenge is, and this is just just a few of many, many, many more we could add. But each one of these faith traditions, each version of Christianity, whether it's a denomination or a sub-denomination or independent churches, each one of these comes with their own terms and conditions, right? Their own traditions, their own expectations on how you behave, their expectations in terms of how you worship, their own translations of the Bible in some case, and their own interpretation of their translation of the Bible. And the main thing that all of these have in common, there's really two things they have in common, but the main thing they all have in common is each one of these is absolutely confident that they're right. And everybody else is not right, or half right, or misinformed, or confused, or uninformed, or maybe misled. And the truth is, including our faith tradition, our network of churches, the truth is, all of us are probably wrong about some things, but hopefully we're not wrong about the essential things, the fundamental things, the kind of bottom line things that you have to believe in order to be a faithful follower of Jesus, the essential things. So the question is, what is actually fundamental? What's actually indispensable, necessary, crucial, can't be without, central? We're gonna talk about one of those today. And what's absolutely required to believe in order to be a faithful follower of Jesus? You're familiar with this phrase, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I actually looked this up. I wondered where this came from. This is actually a 16th century German idiom that serves as a warning. And so here's kind of a clunky definition of how this word picture is to serve as a warning. So I'll just read this to you. In your zeal, in other words, this is what it means not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. In your zeal to rid yourself of something unwanted or harmful, and we should all rid ourselves of things that are harmful for sure, right? In your zeal to rid yourself of something unwanted or harmful, don't inadvertently or don't accidentally rid yourself of something valuable and important. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is currently in our culture, way too many people who grew up in church and grew up with faith and have embraced faith somewhere in the past, way too many are throwing baby Jesus out with the bathwater. For some of you, this is your story. When this happens in a church tradition or a specific church or denomination or a network of churches, and all of a sudden you begin to feel a little bit uncomfortable, I'm not really sure about that, I'm not really sure about that, I'm not really sure that's what Jesus would do, I'm not sure that's how Jesus would behave. Mature, and you're mature, and honest people, they feel at times they have no choice but to leave the church. And then here's the catch. If the church they choose to leave, which represents a version of Christianity, if that version of Christianity is the only version they know, they feel like they have no choice but to leave Christianity entirely. In their zeal to separate themselves from something unhealthy or harmful, they separate themselves from something valuable and important. And maybe that's your story. Here's a story I've heard so many times, I can't even remember how many times I've heard the story that goes like this. My father won't have anything to do with church, and I'm not sure why. Well, what happened? Well, he won't exactly tell us, but something happened back there. He had some bad church experience. He won't have anything to do with organized religion. And we've said, Dad, look, hey, there's different kinds of churches. He's like, nope, never gonna step foot inside a church again. Something happened. And he had to distance himself from something harmful, something unwanted. But in doing so, maybe he walked away from something valuable and important. And who could blame you? And now you wonder, is Christianity, or does Christianity have anything? Does Christianity offer anything valuable and important? And if that's you, I gotta tell you, I've been doing this a long time. I understand. I understand why you threw baby Jesus out with the bathwater, because your church tradition and the theology you were handed and your church experience made it impossible for you to distinguish between the two. And that happens all the time. Traditionally, the church hasn't left space for people's faith to grow up, or the church hasn't created space for people to question their faith. In fact, most church traditions often mitigate against allowing people's faith to grow up. We don't allow space, we don't provide space, because every church tradition has a box. This is our box, and it's the God box, and God's in our box, and this is how God operates. And if you don't think God operates the way we think God operates, then you're not a God person. You have to go somewhere else. And everybody has their box. But at some point along the way, all of us have questions, and all of us should ask those questions, because a faith tradition or a faith that can't be questioned can't be trusted. But sometimes it's difficult within a faith tradition to create the space for people to ask those necessary questions without feeling like they have to leave or step away in order to ask the questions for fear of how they'll be treated or fear of how they'll be chastised. So we don't provide space oftentimes for people to determine what's essential and what's traditional, what's comfortable, what's tribal, what's simply familial. Here's my observation. A faith that is not allowed to grow up will be deconstructed intentionally or eventually.